Hey guys, in the last video you guys learned factor by grouping when there are 4 terms. So for example, we have x cubed plus 3x squared plus 2x plus 6. So in the last video we talked about breaking these into 2 groups. So in that first group you'll have an x cubed plus a 3x squared, and in the second group you have 2x plus 6. And then we look at the GCF for each of those groups. So in this first group, they both have an x squared, so we're going to factor out an x squared, or think of the reverse distributive property, and then we'll be left with x plus 3. And then in the second group, we're going to factor out a GCF of 2, so that comes to the front. And then we'll be left with x plus 3. So now we have a common factor of x plus 3. And then our other factor is going to be made up of the x squared and the 2 that we factored out from each of those groups. So this is your final answer. So in this next example, I wanted to show you guys how we can factor a trinomial with a coefficient, still using the x, but also include the factor by grouping, because I know that we've been using the x a lot. So if you do your x, remember you do 3 times 8, that will go in the top, and then the 10 will go in the bottom. So think of 2 numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 10. Those numbers would be 6 and 4. So what we're going to do with these numbers is rewrite the 10x, but using the 6 and the 4. So the 10x is now going to become 6x plus 4x. And now we've taken our trinomial and we've rewritten it with 4 terms instead of 3, using what we found with our x. So to do factor by grouping, we're going to break this into 2 groups. So 3x squared plus 6x is one group, and then we'll have the 4x plus 8 in the other group. And then we're going to factor out our common factors. So the first binomial looks like we can take out a 3 and an x out of both of those. So that will leave me with x plus 2. And then in the second binomial, looks like we can take out a 4. So that will leave me, hopefully, with an x plus 2. Yes, with an x plus 2. So then you have your common factor of x plus 2. And then your other factor was made up of the 2 terms that we factored out, your 3x plus your 4. So this problem is very similar when applying the magic x, because normally when we do the magic x, we would use our 6 and our 4, and then we would draw that line, remember, and we would put that coefficient in front. So it's very similar, because when we write this binomial as 3x plus 6, we still end up taking out a common factor, which leaves me with x plus 2. And then on the other side, we have 3x plus 4, which doesn't have a common factor to factor anything out. So we have 3x plus 4. So notice we get the same answer as factor by grouping. They're very, very similar, but they just have some subtle differences. So let's do one more example. 9x squared plus 18x plus 8. So I can use my x to help me out. So 9 times 8 is 72. And then the 18 goes on the bottom. So 2 numbers that multiply to 72 and add to 18. So those 2 numbers are going to be 12 and 6. So remember, we take these two numbers, the 12 and the 6, and we're going to rewrite the middle term as 6x plus 12x. Now we just bring down everything else, so the 9x squared plus the 6x plus 12x plus 8. And now we're breaking this into two groups, so 9x squared plus 6x in the first group, and then 12x plus 8 in the second group. And now let's look at what we can factor out. So it looks like we can factor out an x out of the 9x squared plus 6x and a 3. So that's 3x, and then we are left inside with, looks like a 3x plus 2. And then out of the second binomial, looks like we can take out a 4. So that will leave me with 3x plus 2. So you have your common factor of 3x plus 2. And then your second one will be the 3x plus 4. Okay, real quick, I just want to show you what happens if you write those factors in a different order. So if we have those the same trinomial, 9x squared, and then change the 18x to the 6x plus 12, but instead of 6x plus 12, I'm going to put the 12x first instead of the 6x, and then put the 8. So hopefully you can see that this is different because I use the 12x first. So we're still going to break this into the two groups, and we will have 9x squared plus 12x in that first group, and then the 6x plus 8 in that second group. We're still going to find a common factor out of each group. So this is where the difference is going to be. So now I'm looking for a common factor between 9x squared and 12x. So they both have an x, and then 3 is the other number that can go into both of those. So we're going to pull out the 3x, and you are going to be left with 3x plus 4. And in the second binomial, we're going to pull out a 2. So that's going to be 2 times 3x plus 4. So now your common factor ended up being 3x plus 4 instead of the 3x plus 2. So sometimes the order matters. Sometimes you will need to rearrange things to be able to take a factor out. But a lot of the time, if you rearrange, like in this example, the 6x and the 12x, the order I wrote those terms really didn't matter. I still ended up getting the same answer, just the common factor ended up being different.